Welcome back to Reddit RX. On today's video, what's your childhood mystery that you finally solved years later? The weird smell that I referred to as a stinky cheese smell were probably a symptom of seizures. I would happen maybe twice a year. It's not really like cheese. It's like a smell that isn't a smell. IDK how to even describe it. It was so minor parents disregarded it. I can remember it starting in 2nd grade. I suddenly started having it a lot more as an adult when I hit 28 and got diagnosed 2 years later after symptoms became way more extreme. Makes so much sense now. My dad used to occasionally burst out with this one line of a song, said Barnacle Bill the Sailor. Only ever that line. When I was 6 or so, I asked him why and he said it was an old drinking song that was absolutely filthy. And I was too young to hear the rest of it. This continued once or twice a year until I was 18. I told him I was an adult now. And he could tell me the rest of the song. I distinctly remember him looking up from the newspaper, sighing and folding it, then going. The truth is I can never remember the rest of the song. And then went right back to reading the newspaper. The entire time I lived in my childhood home, my mom hid my Christmas presents in her secret hiding place. She made it sound mystical and mysterious a few months ago. A while after I moved out, she finally told me what the secret hiding place actually was. The Christmas tree box in a cabinet in the garage. She would replace the Christmas tree with my presents when she put the tree up. I remember being about 8 and in the car with my dad. I was in the front seat and we were driving somewhere, and this song came on the radio. He cranked it and said something about it being the best guitar playing ever. He really jammed out, which was really uncharacteristic because he was usually so stoic. It was the only time I heard the song, and he died before I could ever ask him what song it was. When I asked around, no one knew WTF I was talking about or what song I was thinking of. So I had this melody in my head for years, but how do you look up a song that has no lyrics? So for years and years, this song stayed on the back burner in my brain. I was afraid to forget it. Somehow this story pops up when I'm like 26 or so, chatting with my husband and we searched YouTube for best guitar songs. After about 15 minutes, we find it. Asterisk. Cliffs of Dover was the song that I'd burned into my brain on repeat for 16 years. Now I jam out to it with my kids. Edit. Thank you so much for the kind words and awards. I'm kinda speechless at how big this post got. But thank you. When I was in elementary school, I always wondered what the teacher's staff room was like. It seemed so mysterious, and I remember trying to get a peek. Anytime I walked by and the door would open. Later became a teacher and can fully confirm their dull, often toxic spaces full of cranky teachers complaining about students. Reverse of this, as a kid, my dad would call me from the other side of the house to bring him something to drink from the kitchen. He always drank from a straw, and about 1st grade, I started getting annoyed at this. So I started poking a tiny hole in his straw as my own little vengeance. I didn't come clean about this until I was like 22 years old. The look on his face was priceless. It's like he instantly snapped back to then and knew exactly what I was talking about and just said, "Son of a asterisk, 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 comma you did, didn't you?" He just thought we bought cheap straws. When I was younger, like 4 or 5, my family had a pet turtle. One day the turtle went missing and my parents told me it climbed the wall in our backyard and went to the creek behind our house. I, being a naive toddler child, did not question this logic. Fast forward to when I was 17 and driving with my mom in the car. We saw a tortoise crossing the street. And I was suddenly thrown back to my memory of us having a pet turtle. I pulled over to save the tortoise and was all OMG mom, turtles can't climb walls. What happened to our turtle? Came to find out it had burrowed a hole in our lawn and my dad didn't notice until after he ran it over with a lawnmower. Crying face. Obviously it was easier to pick up the pieces and tell your kid it climbed the wall than admit you murdered it with a lawnmower. TLDR. Parents lied to me about a pet going missing and I found out it was brutally murdered, on accident, by my father. I have huge gaps in my memories as a child. Like, weirdly inexplicable ones that always felt weird. Not just basic forgetting stuff. I've had a few instances of this happening as an adult as well. Well, turns out I have a dissociative disorder and that can cause amnesia. Mystery of why my mom never ordered anything for herself and was never hungry whenever she took my sister and I to eat out. 25 years later, she told me she really was hungry and wanted to eat too. But she only had enough money to feed the two of us. She didn't want us to feel guilty. I love my mom so much. Edit. Bro, I really didn't expect for this to blow up this much. Thank you, kind and appreciative strangers of Reddit. My mom used to call us in for dinner by yelling out the back door from the kitchen. I was in middle school before I realized the screen door was actually called a screen door. I solved a family mystery for my mom. I wasn't allowed to play console video games during the week all the way until I was 18, but some nights I'd really be craving it, so I would noiselessly creep through my house into my basement where I could play video games in peace. But once every 30 times or so one of my parents would need something from the basement and I'd quickly turn off the TV monitor, hide in the guest room and pray they didn't turn on a light or notice the Xbox was on. One night I ducked into the guest room and hid behind the bed. To my horror, my mom followed me into the room and turned on the lights. I was panicking, so when she started digging through the closet with her back to me, I made a run for it. I nearly brushed her shirt, and if she'd seen me, I'd probably have given her a heart attack. But I made it and kept going all the way to bed. About 5 years went by and my mom said something like, "You, Ray, such a quiet walker." And I told her it was because of my basement trips, thinking I had nothing to lose. My mom's face went kinda solemn. And when I explained, she said, "So there really was someone down there?" And she explained that she remembered that exact night and the feeling that there was a ghost in the room. Over the next couple days she'd stare into space and just say, "I can't believe you were really there." She seemed to get over it. But she probably checks empty rooms closer now. The reason my aunt punched her husband at the pool during a huge family vacation. It was because she found out that the long distance charges to the hotel room they shared had a ton of calls to a woman he was known to think was swell. We grew up poor, and at the age of 10 my friends were all having these crazy birthday parties with petting zoos, bounce houses, clowns, etc. So my mother, who is very resourceful, decided I would have a sleepover for my 11th birthday. It was great, and we were gonna make ice cream cones. So we got all the stuff out with my mom, and my mother opened up the box of cones, and they were all smashed up. She said that we weren't having regular ice cream, we were having Magic Castle sundaes, because the broken ice cream cones resembles the sections of a castle. We all thought this was great. And we had them. When my friends went home, they asked their parents to make Magic Castle sundaes. 2 days ago I found out that my mother was getting the past sell-by foods behind the grocery store. They were not expired, just past sell-by date. She had no idea that the cones were brown up until she opened them with us. She thought of the Magic Castle idea quickly, and we all loved it. Just goes to show how stupid kids are, lol. When I was really young, me and my siblings would play in my grandparents' yard. My grandfather would tell us to stay away from the skunk hole at the edge of the yard. We lived in South Texas, so this wasn't something out of the ordinary, and we just avoided it like any other animal home. Years later it dawned on me. It was actually the septic tank access. I visited my dad when I was 6 or 7 years old at the place where he worked, or so I was told. I remember remarking at the time, and people laughed at me, because I said it looked just like a prison. The people laughing were the guards. And I was indeed visiting my dad at Terminal Island Federal Correctional Institution, where he was a federal inmate. When I was 10, my godfather gave me $20 as a Christmas gift. At the end of the dinner the money had disappeared. For years my parents blamed me for being irresponsible with my money. Years later we figured out, after she was caught stealing stuff from my aunt's house, that my cousin's fiancé at the time is a kleptomaniac. Turns out she was the one that stole the money. I was watching Star Trek TNG with my dad when someone told Riker to wash his back. When I asked my father why someone would say that to another person, he said, "So you can smell someone coming up behind you." It wasn't until years later that I understood how easy it was to hear watch as wash. And how committed my dad was to willfully deceiving his children for personal satisfaction. When my brother, my sister and I were kids, there was the incident of the little M's. I must have been about 5 years old, my brother 7, and my sister 9. One evening my mum had been decorating the living room, and about halfway up the wall were these little squiggles that appeared in pencil on the freshly painted wall. They went the whole way along the wall and the entire way around the room. When my mum saw them, she hit the roof. There was hours of screaming and grilling and trying to get one of us to confess to writing on the wall. I was the prime suspect being so young, but on closer inspection the little squiggles looked like little M's, with my sister's name beginning with M. She was also a suspect. My mum sent us all to our room to talk through which one of us was going to confess. When we all get to our bedroom, we quickly figured out none of us had done it. We knew one of us had to confess because my mum was, well, batshit crazy. So me, being the youngest, took one for the team, as we had decided I would be punished the least. Many years later we asked her about it. She admitted that she had figured out the next day that it had bled through the painting from underneath. Someone must have marked a border around the room, possibly for a dado rail or something. We laughed it off, but we were pretty pissed she didn't admit it and apologize at the time. Until my mum finally shed light on it, my brother, my sister, and I would sometimes say to each other, remember the little M.S. in such a world-weary way. Edit. Grammar and spelling. Edit 2. Changed from Ms to M's, as in there was what looked like lots of the letter M around the wall. John Travolta was actually John Travolta, which really made a lot more sense. Who ate all the cherries in the cherry cake? I was blamed for this for years after someone picked out all of the cherries and ate them during a family Christmas party. 8 years later my little sister confessed to me that it had been her. One evening when camping, my brother caught a fish that we decided to keep alive in the cooler for some reason. Well, the next morning we ran out to see the fish, and it had grown like 5 inches. We were so excited and didn't know how the fish grew that much overnight. Last year we brought it up and my dad said that he had got up that morning and seen the fish being taken by a raccoon, and that he spent the next hour or so frantically fishing for another one. He said he caught the new fish, the first one he was able to catch, just a few minutes before we got up. I had never questioned that the fish growing that much as I grew up, but after hearing what really happened I did feel like we probably should have wondered about that more. I remember there was a time where I had to start asking to go play in the backyard. When I was about 6, 7, maybe 8, with my siblings, so she could supervise us. We never had to do this previously, so my siblings and I were very confused, and anytime we didn't ask she got us in big trouble. Turns out the neighbors were harboring a known pedophile in their house, and that's why mom got so upset with us going outside without asking. Edit. I have no idea if this man was on the run or not from the authorities. My mom probably had no idea either. Though if she knew he was on the run, she for sure would have tipped the authorities. Mom did catch the man having sex with a teen on our front lawn and called the police. Not sure what happened after that. Also, at this time my neighbors did not have a child of their own. Not mine, but my husband's. I hope he doesn't see this BC, then my cover is blown. He said in middle school, there was a time that he'd get pulled out of class to shoot free throws in the gym. Only him. He didn't think this was strange, but didn't understand why he was the only one that got to do that. Turns out, his parents told his teachers he couldn't participate in sex ed. Haha. Not sure if this is considered a mystery or not. My mother, who passed about in 2009, used to make a meatloaf every single year on Groundhog's Day. Every single year. Every single year she would tell us it was groundhog. And I always thought it just tasted like ground beef. But I was kid. I'm 33 now. Last year I said something to my brother about it and asked if he knew where mom got the groundhog. I wanted to do that for son. My brother had no idea what I was talking about. I told him about it and he started laughing. My wife started laughing. My own son, who didn't know why, started laughing. Mom got me good. Mystery solved. It was just regular meatloaf. When I was like 8 or so, I answered our house phone, and it was a man who asked to speak to my mom. Didn't ask for her by name, said could I speak to your mom, please? I asked who it was, and he said it's Santa Claus. I was so excited and ran to my mom. And I was telling all my friends for days that Santa Claus had called my house. This led me to believe in Santa for a few years longer than most kids normally do. I was heartbroken when I found out that Santa wasn't real. Years and years later I remembered to ask my mom who had called that day and said they were Santa Claus. It was our reverend, and my mom was a deacon. He had known me for years, so recognized my voice when I answered and knew what age I was. It had never occurred to me. I've always wanted to know what was behind the ATMs at a bank, how it worked and where did the money come from. I grew up and worked at a bank just to find out some fat dude had to squeeze behind the ATMs to refill it. Me. When I was a kid in the 70s, my parents worked in Canada's Arctic, but were from Nova Scotia. I had a pet mouse, Pixie. Pixie died the night before our family flew home to Nova Scotia for summer vacation. It was many years later before I realized that probably wasn't a sad coincidence. I had meningitis when I was 2 years old, and my baby brother had it also and he died. I had the viral form, he had the bacterial form. I grew up thinking I had it first and always felt like I gave it to him and was the reason he died. I know, but you can't help what you think, especially when you're a kid. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that he actually had it before me. I don't know why no one had ever told me that before, except maybe they didn't because they weren't aware that I always harbored this guilt about it since I kept everything inside. Not one person had ever mentioned to me that he had died before I got it, or maybe I was in the hospital when he died. That part still isn't clear to me. I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks, so it could have been before or during my hospital stay. My dad is an ex-Catholic, and every night when he'd tuck me in until I left the house he'd say we love you. God bless you. Good night. And I was always wondering why, since he had stopped going to church long ago. Fast forward to me being 28 years old and watching an old Bruce Springsteen concert together, one of his favorite artists, and Bruce says, "We love you. God bless you. Good night." At the end of his set, I turned my head towards my dad and asked if this is why he's said that for years to me at night. He laughed and said, "I have no original material." I live and grew up in the deep south. As a child from earliest memories until about 8, we would take a winter trip up to Stowe, Vermont to see the grandparents. I would have scary nights hearing ghosts wailing outside the windows. It was terrifying. GPs moved south and we stopped going. When I was in my 30s I took another trip up to Vermont. First night stay. I heard the ghosts. Turns out the winter winds up north are way different than the winds of southern nights. Suddenly my general fear of the dark disappeared as I realized fully what the source of the sound was. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this Reddit story, please like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.